You're an unsung hero, so I'll sing this song for you. No one's trying to understand it, make a noise and make it clear. We're not gonna sit in silence, we're not gonna live in fear.
Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow, together on one pod, talking Hawks and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners, exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Episode 60 of Legends and Listeners is on for you. And this lovely Thursday morning from the Channel Seed Studios, Chad Leistikow here of the Des Moines Register, joined by Scott Dochterman of The Athletic on the growing Iowa Everywhere Network. Scott, we agreed last week that Saturday night's game at Huntington Bank Stadium was going to be a must-win for the Iowa football program. And in the second half, the Hawkeyes played like that was the case. 4 scores on 4 second-half possessions after halftime, turned a 14-7 deficit into a 31-14 win. Honestly, a dominant win in a must-win situation. Your thoughts on the importance of those 30 minutes of football, Scott, that we witnessed on this Iowa season?
You know, at halftime, Chad, I thought that Kinnick Stadium was on fire or something, and that was basically because of the rhetoric that we received from people on Twitter and the like. But the second half was exactly what you want. You want this team to respond. It was in an adverse situation, had some couple things that went against it. Minnesota played well in the second quarter. Give them their credit. I mean, they played well and hit a couple of passes that were just really tough and defended Iowa well. But I thought, strangely enough, the last couple of plays of the first half where they ran the ball for like 40 yards in 2 plays, it was like, they got something here. And then next thing you know, the second half just turned into floodgates, and it was quite the clubbing. So 24-0 in the second half. What was it? Almost a 200-yard advantage, I think it was, in the second half. You can't ask for more than that. And I thought overall that was Iowa's clearly its best half of the season, and I think it's something that they can truly build on.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing when they ran those plays, and it was just like, I felt like they just needed to remind themselves, like, we've got this amazing running game that when we just execute it like they did in those situations, it's borderline unstoppable. I mean, as long as you keep going to it. And Caleb Johnson, just unbelievable. He's obviously he should get a lot of the credit, but as we'll get into in the course of our show, it's really been a combination of scheme, line play, wide receiver blocking. There's a lot of stuff going on that has contributed to the success. I mean, and the Hawks are averaging, 32 points per game. They scored 31 points on offense, Scott, in their Big Ten opener. I mean, just that on itself is like a pretty decent accomplishment, especially against a team that recorded back-to-back shutouts coming into this one. And it's a rival. It was seen as a toss-up game.
Yeah, it was a 2.5 point. I was 2.5 point favorite. You look at, they're averaging 32 points a game, Chad. Last year, that would have kept Brian Ferentz's job. I mean, it would have been way over the drive for 325. But last year, they averaged 15.4 points per game. Now they're at 32. That's pretty impressive. That's a nice jump for this team. And to be able to do it consistently, the way able to do it the other day against a team that had 2 consecutive shutouts. And they held North Carolina to 19 points, and that was
one touchdown. One touchdown they give
right, 4 field goals, and then Iowa just thoroughly dominated them with the running game. And as you said, there's a lot of tentacles to that running game that I think really paid off. I thought there were some gutsy calls, that if they would have backfired, the fan base would have been really up in arms, but instead they worked out for a lot of reasons, and ultimately they're 3-1. They're not exactly where they want to be because they'll have that loss hanging over their shoulder the whole season until next September. But, overall, it's you could see the trajectory of this team, no matter who the next opponent is, and we know who it is. Beyond that, this team looks like it's building towards something of high quality.
Yeah, what a difference a half makes, right, Scott? I mean, at halftime, you, me, and Tom Caker were kind of huddled there in the press box in Minneapolis, and it was like, I mean, we basically said to each other, like, these 30 minutes are going to tell us about this season, basically. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't expect Iowa to dominate that much. I thought, I still felt okay about it. But as you look back on the game, it was really just 2 bad possessions on defense, honestly. Like the rest of the first half, the defense was pretty good. And there was 1 catch on the sideline that was borderline. And give Minnesota credit.
Yeah.
They made some tough catches. The first touchdown catch was tough. The Brockington catch was a catch officially, as you and Phil Park surmised.
Yeah.
It was a tough catch. It was a good catch.
Yeah.
Well covered,
Right.
play. And even the touchdown play, Scott, it was like one of the most physical plays I've seen this year. It was just Jamari Harris just got, slammed the guy. He made a great play to get in the end zone. So it wasn't like the other games where the defense made some just inexplicable breakdowns. It was a case of Minnesota making some plays. And then what I liked about the second half is both sides of the ball. Iowa made adjustments. Phil Parker started sending Nick Jackson almost every time on pass downs. And it was just enough to break up Minnesota's timing and speed up Matt Brosmer just a little bit. And he just was not effective in the second half. And I thought it was hilarious, Scott, that on the last play of the third quarter on 3rd and 10, down 24-14 already, PJ Fleck runs basically a surrender handoff. Lost a yard on it.
Yeah.
And that was the end of the third quarter. And it was like,
Right.
Wow, what a dominant third quarter that was. You've basically taken the life out of PJ Fleck. And, they didn't utter a peep in the fourth quarter either.
It was pretty impressive. I want to say the yardage was like in the third quarter, like 159-14. They just thoroughly dominated that quarter. And up front along the line of scrimmage, I thought that this is the best offensive line play I've seen since the 20 team, was able to run the ball with effectiveness, probably against Minnesota with Tyler Goodson and those team, that team up there. There was, the defense in the first half, that they gave up 2 touchdown drives, and that's beyond what they want to do, obviously. But, my point to Phil was, it wasn't to say that was some, great catch you gave up. I mean, it was so contested that somebody makes a play like that. Do you just kind of tip your cap and say, man, sometimes that happens? And then he kind of went into the whole, if you haven't been beat, you haven't played football. And I understand that. But then rather than like say the plays the game before or the one Wampa gave up against Iowa State, those are plays that drive you crazy because it's a mental challenge as much as it is physical. That one was, hey, they just beat you with a great play. And then, the touchdown pass to the tight end, went over Sebastian Castro. That's, perfectly placed ball, 6'5", 6'6" tight end over 5'11", 6-foot wide receiver. Defensive back, you just can't get to that. So, but, to me, the defense is fine. I mean, they're allowing 62 yards a game on rushing, 2.4 yards per carry. Their yards per play are up, and that's because of those big plays. But, they've got 5 interceptions already. I still think there's some room to improve, and I know they would agree with that. Be a little more consistent in the back end, but switching over to, going to Deshaun Lee, who started a lot of games last year. They must feel safer with him right now than with TJ Hall, but I still wouldn't throw out TJ Hall just yet. I think he's still got some positives to him. So overall, Chad, I feel pretty good about this team and what it accomplished on Saturday night.
Well, we had a great session, as you kind of referenced there, Scott, with all 3 coordinators. And I do want to unpack some of those, especially the one with Tim Lester. But before we do that, I wanted to hit you with this question, which I did not prep you for. What does success look like for this Iowa team next week at Ohio State?
It's a great question. I think for me, it's competing.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily. This is not a game where, like Minnesota, if you lose, to me, that's your season.
Mhm.
But with Ohio State, it's not, because, well, they're number 3 in the country for a reason. You haven't won there since we were seniors in high school. So you got to understand what you're dealing with.
That's crazy to think about.
But I've been there too when Iowa has played really well and lost. Overtime game in 2009, which was one of the 5 or 6 best games of the Big Ten in the last 25 years. At least that's how I ranked it. And the 2013 game was very competitive, 24-24 in the fourth quarter. Just a little bit too much from Ohio State athletically. Braxton Miller and Carlos Hyde was on that team. Took a huge shot from Tanner Miller and still ran in the end zone. That's probably what I'm talking about, which is don't make any stupid mistakes. Don't do what you did last time, because that was gross. Just go in there, play your best game. And if it's good enough, then awesome. You just, had a signature victory. If it's not the end of the world. You just want to walk off that field going, you know what, we played pretty well, and move on. And, to me, that's probably something no more than a 10-point defeat. But basically you cut Ohio State, if you're in the ring, you made
Right.
them bleed for a while. So, if it's a 10-point loss or less, and it wasn't because of anything stupid, I think you just kind of tip your cap, move on, and figure, you know what, we're not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the team's gonna go in there to win the game.
Absolutely.
They're gonna talk all week about winning the game. The team isn't gonna look for moral victories, anything like that. But yeah, given what happened 2 years ago, Scott, I mean, that was about as ugly, and probably the representation, right, of the last 3 years of Iowa football on offense. And frankly on defense, because they scored on defense in that game. It sacked CJ Stroud, who's like one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL probably right now. And Joe Evans ran it in for a score. But you had just abysmal quarterback play. I think Spencer Petras threw a pick on the first play of the game.
He did.
Alex Padilla, gets the call in the second half, fumbles the first snap. It loses it.
Yeah.
Torrey Taylor even ran a punt and got tackled for nobody could do anything right. And then of course you get the press conference afterwards with Doug and interrogating Kirk about Brian Ferentz, and that turned into a thing. And that got Iowa fans even more riled up about this offense. So it was really like the flashpoint. So you want to see, I guess, just from our perspective, be in the game, make it a game, prove that your offense can move the ball against them. Don't have it be like a, Caleb Johnson 20 carries for 32 yards, type of game. Maybe he goes 19 for 118 or something, and you lose, 30-20, something like that. It's just, you just don't want to see, Cade crap the bed with 4 picks, something like that, in my opinion. And I know I'm probably, soft pedaling a little bit here to just want them to play well. But I think we're in that position. We're
not players.
Yeah, we're not players. And hey, I don't totally discount that they can't win the game. I definitely, what I saw against Minnesota gave me more confidence that they could compete in this game.
You think about 7 years ago in Iowa City and how unbelievable that was. And it truly was, because the week before, Iowa beats Minnesota by a touchdown at home, 17-10. Their offense was similar level. The tight ends were growing, but they weren't the tight ends yet. And then the next week, what happened here? And I think that's kind of what, it kind of gives you that little bit of hope if you're an Iowa fan that maybe something can happen. And you look at it and go, Iowa's best punch is right now with its running game. Now, Ohio State is a little different because it is awesome on defense. That's it. It's the best in the country in my eyes. And I think that's going to present some challenges. Obviously, there are challenges. That's not neither here nor there. It's just going to be really difficult. So I think what you want is, can you move the ball with effectiveness? Can you do all the things you do with the two other units that you have in years past, which is play special teams, pin them back, play good defense, force them to really move the ball on you, because I know they're explosive through the passing game, but I just don't think they're as explosive as they once were. I think Will Howard's a good quarterback. He's not CJ Stroud. Jeremiah Smith will be Marvin Harrison. He's not yet. Emeka Egbuka is a really good NFL first-round draft pick who's, not quite Garrett Wilson. So, I think that there's, now the running backs are awesome too, but Iowa's run defense is really good. So I think there's some pieces there that, and if you're Ohio State, this is kind of a trap game for you, because they're playing Michigan State this weekend, which isn't, in that trap realm. But the weekend after, they're going to Oregon. So they're going to have to play Iowa, which we know, very physical defense, has a week off. So they're going to be well rested. They're pretty confident running the football, and they're going to bring the thunder. Now, Ohio State, I thought 7 years ago, could not match it. They were not tough enough mentally or physically to withstand that over and over and over again. And they're an immense talent, couldn't overcome it either. This time around, let's see what they got. I do think defensively they are in that category, though. I think they are way tougher than they were back then, even though they had Nick Bosa and some other phenomenal players.
Yeah. Well, Scott, the Hawkeyes definitely showed up on game day in Minneapolis. And like Iowa's second half performance in the house of PJ Fleck, Game Day Men's Health is a game changer. All you guys, especially older dudes out there, it's time to get back in the game with Game Day Men's Health. Get your T checked out. Low testosterone can bring you down. It affects your mood, your energy, your sex drive, your athletic performance. I just ran a 10K on Saturday morning at a time I didn't think was possible a month or two ago. And a big reason for that was, I trained for it, sure, but I had the energy to put forth good efforts into my training. And that's one of the many benefits of increasing your testosterone. And Game Day, as we've mentioned previously, can also help you with your weight loss. Get your free private, no obligation consultation today. Check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or call one of the locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty. And make sure to tell them you heard about Game Day on Legends and Listeners, which, as we mentioned last week, is the best show on Iowa everywhere. So, and Aiden, if he jumped on here, would agree, even though he's a Cyclone.
I agree.
There, yes,
there he
is. Well, Scott, Tim Lester spoke with us on Tuesday. That was a absolutely fabulous 26 minutes with Iowa's offensive coordinator. Very insightful. Every single question had a thorough answer with a lot of depth to it. And I thought all the questions from start to finish were good too. There's no wasted time, which I always hate in those coordinator press conferences sometimes. It was a great presser. But I wanted to start with this, Scott. What did you make of Tim Lester on Tuesday saying that Saturday's game at Minnesota was one of Cade McNamara's best games?
You have to look at it for what it was. And I understand where he comes from that. He was efficient. He didn't have to just sling it. He didn't have to make a lot of big plays. He had to be efficient in how he passed. And there were some mistakes. And I think one thing I always appreciate is when coordinators or coaches are willing to tell you a little bit that this isn't his fault, that somebody else ran the wrong route. And that happened to him a couple of times. And he's like, this would have been a big play. And it just didn't work out because the receiver ran the wrong route. And you got to remember at this point, they still are only 4 games into this regime. When you start going, quarterback wasn't there in the spring because he had an ACL. Starting wide receivers, one was prom and going to track, and the other one was at Northwestern getting a multi-million-dollar degree. The tight end was still rehabbing from his broken leg. So you had all these factors that are still working through. And I like the fact that he was honest and he came and was very forthright. It looks like it's still a work in progress to me in the passing game, but I think the fact that he was like, hey, we counted him as 11 for 13, not 11 for 19 because there were drops, and we know that. And then there were routes that weren't run correctly. And I think that's really, and that says something. Not the total yards. The total yards needs to go up, but I think otherwise, he may be onto something there.
Well, what I like about Tim Lester in this setting is that he's not just explaining it to be truthful, which he is, but he's explaining it in a way that's easy to understand for everybody out there.
Mhm.
And it's and what he's looking for. And it was interesting. After the game, I asked Cade McNamara, because we really wanted to know, like, what happened at halftime? Like, what the heck, guys? I mean, like, people like throwing chairs, the what was it, the trash can or whatever with Robert Gallery in 2003 at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Was there something like that? And it was just like, and with Tim Lester, here's what it was. He told Cade McNamara, your footwork is the best it's been all season. Like the throws are going to be there, and it's going to click in the second half. And what they did, they started with one of their openers.
Yeah.
First play, bootleg to Addison Ostrenga. How many times have we seen that in Iowa football? It's not unique to Tim Lester. It's the fake, roll out, dump it. It was a 5-yard pass in the air, Scott, and it went for 20. It was Iowa's longest pass play of the game, and that seemed to just unlock everything. And I thought, McNamara was 4 for 6 in the second half, like you said, efficient. And one of the incompletions was the Ostrenga catch that was overturned. It was a beautiful throw.
Right.
So it was just a strong second half. I mean, he trusted. It wasn't like Tim Lester, was yelling and screaming. He was like, hey, your footwork's there. It's going to come. And he was exactly right. And so I like that about what Tim Lester said about Cade's game on Tuesday, because he explained, his footwork was a mess against Iowa State, Scott.
Yes.
It was not. It's better.
It was faster. Yeah.
And so I think that's and as far as the passing game goes, I liked how he explained the precision, the timing. One of the routes, the main route that they missed because of the timing, was the Caleb Brown route. It was 3rd and 9, and he just didn't break it off fast enough. He stuttered. Cade threw it as if he was going to break it fast, which is what he's supposed to do. On TV, it looks like Cade missed the throw, and people are griping about Cade.
Yeah.
But that wasn't on Cade. And Tim Lester did a good job explaining that. He wasn't throwing Caleb Brown under the bus. He was just saying Caleb's still learning the timing of this offense. Everyone's kind of working at their own pace, and they're trying to fit it all together, Scott. So it made sense to me. I realize how people out there might not see it that way, though.
Right. Yeah, and there's a reason why. I mean, people talk about this all the time, that and I'm sure they ask you as much as they do me, why isn't Caleb Brown playing more? And because he only had 1 snap in that game. Well, it's that kind of stuff that kind of does that. When you're expected to be somewhere and you're not there, they got to find somebody who's more reliable. And then Phil Parker does the exact same thing. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have the skills to do that. And maybe they need to find ways to get him the ball, and that it's not as as an extreme of a play, but then again, he should be figuring that out. And there's so many working parts, and getting timing down, it takes time. It takes practice, because you're going against a different secondary than your own, and they've got different skill sets, and they do different things. So overall, I think that I really liked what I heard, because he was honest. He was, he wasn't throwing anybody under the bus, as you say, but he was explaining the situations in a way that, to me, is, we can accept it. And I think fans could listen to it and agree that, okay, I understand it now. And that's what I want to do. That's why I tell everybody, even whether I'm watching a game on TV or I'm talking to a coach, is I want to learn something. And I thought I learned something from him on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think that's valuable. I really do. I mean, I think, those on the outside, I think, get frustrated when Kirk's up there and he'll just say, we're working on it or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of the vague generics about the offense. He doesn't offer those kind of specifics. And I just love that Tim was able to offer that. And I feel like it's a service to the entire Iowa football program to preach patience, but also, here's another thing he said, Scott. He said he thinks the passing game is close. And I think that was off your question maybe.
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting too. And right now I'm listening with an ear that believes him. I have no reason to believe he's not telling the truth. He believes they're close with these tiny things. The other route that I think was the wrong one was Terrell Washington. It was an early out. It was like
Mhm.
about a 6 yard out. He started in the backfield, and he didn't flatten the route to the left. Instead,
Yeah.
he went a little. He looped it,
Yeah.
and Cade threw it where he thought he was going to be,
Yeah.
with the blitz coming. And Terrell's a freshman.
Yeah.
Terrell's a freshman. Jarrett Bowie's a freshman. Dayton Howard's a freshman. Reese Vanderzie's a freshman. This is
Mhm.
all understandable,
Mhm.
but it's also encouraging because they're
Yeah.
all freshmen.
Right.
That they're going to get it, and he believes they're going to get it at some point. And this is a big week for that. So the bye week, Scott, I believe, does come at a good time for this offense.
Yeah, this isn't one of those bye weeks where it's like, hey, let's get everybody rested up. I mean, if you got some bumps and bruises, do it. But this is, to me, an exciting part for the offense in particular, which is, okay, let's assess our first 4 weeks and look at the strengths and the weaknesses, the areas that we need to improve on, the areas we can shed, and what can we move forward with. And so I think practice on Iowa, not against an opponent, is really pivotal for that offense, for the passing game, to get to a point where it's it's an asset. That's, I think, that's kind of how I phrased it with him, is not just a passing game, but you want it to actually work and win possessions for you, and win downs, and score points, and I think they're still a little ways from that. They're okay in the first game, but that's Illinois State. Ohio State's a little different than Illinois State. So, the same thing with Michigan State for that matter. So I do think that overall that I liked what I heard. And then, of course, when you start to talk about running game, that to me is, you've got to be excited. And let me just give you some numbers here, Chad, from last year to this year. Iowa is averaging 250 yards a game on the ground, 0.3 yards per game. That's 11th in the country. Last year, they averaged 115.9, which was 109th. They average right now, they're 20th in the country at 6 yards per carry. Last year, they had 3.3 yards per carry. Right now, they have 11 rushing touchdowns. Last year, they had 11 rushing touchdowns. So, and that was 14 games versus 4. So,
That's a good stat there. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty incredible when you think about it. And then, of course, when you look at the defense, they're giving up 62 yards a game, 2.4 yards per carry, and 0 rushing touchdowns. So when you look across the board at the rushing game, it's, yeah, you could wish for better and more and all that, but there's no reason to. I think that the other day was the best played games by Iowa tackles since Alaric Jackson was there, and back in 2020. I mean, Jennings Dunker has been a murderer at right tackle all year. And Mason Richmond was really roughing up the edge too, because when they're able to just blow off the ball, and that's where the difference with the mid zone attack is, that they can go into the defender, not necessarily have to go out and reach the defender, which means that they're not quite as, they're just not quite as, they're more physical, let's say, right now, what they can do. I think that is such a positive for this offense, and that's why they're explosive in the running game, because they're able to get to their defenders quicker, more physically, and then you allow a great running back to reach his hole much quicker than he could before.
So Tim Lester talked about Caleb Johnson taking some time to figure out the mid zone run,
Mhm.
Scott. And obviously he's figuring it out. And what I really like to hear about Caleb Johnson too is just that how hard he's working. Like he said, he's
Mhm.
going 100 miles an hour in practice. He's really studying the game. And you combine all that with his clear physical ability. That is really creating a pretty potent combination where it gives you a lot of confidence that they can continue. This is repeatable, I believe.
Mhm.
Especially they ran every snap, Scott, in 12 personnel in the second half, and I'm counting Hayden Large as a tight end. I'm counting
Yeah.
Cade Peeper as a tight end, which he was
Mhm.
lined up as such
Right.
in the red zone. So every single snap, Scott, was 12. I had 56 out of 64
Yeah, I did.
12s. Yeah. So, man, that's an identity to me, man. Like
Yeah.
they are just leaning into this. And what Tim talked about was how, especially Vanderzee and Gill, are helping to clean up those stacked boxes. They're
Yeah.
compressed into the line of scrimmage so that, hey, there's a numbers advantage. Well, here, we'll throw these guys at you. And if you want to all crowd in, eventually we're going to run our pass routes to the outside and burn you that way.
Yeah, and that seems to be the next step to the offense, which is being able to allow the running game to work for you in the pass game, which is not just with boot, which has worked, but play fake, hit deep. And I think that's more than capable as well. And I think the one thing you can really appreciate with Jacob Gill, and I learned this in the first week from talking to Mason Richmond, and he could not stop talking about Jacob Gill. He's like, I love that guy because he goes out and he blocks. And then you see on the big touchdown run, and you see, Hayden Large is blowing people up, and you see Mason Richmond is, and then all of a sudden down the field, you just see him rock a defensive back. I mean, just blow him back. And, and you look at Jacob Gill and you're like, yeah, that guy doesn't, he looks like a 5'9" point guard, and here he is out there just shredding defenders. And, but the ability to block down the field, that's what changes games from being a 10-yard game to a 40-yard touchdown. And, and I know that warms everybody's heart there, and it should. The smart thing that I think what Tim Lester brought up, and I don't know if you asked about Cade Peeper or not, I can't remember, but the fact that against Iowa State when Kamari Moulton got blown up at the 1 yard line, he asked a walk-on tight end to try to make that block on Dominic Orange, and instead now they decided, well, let's put in a sixth offensive lineman to make that block, the Dan Skipper of the Iowa.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Now he just needs to raise his hand and do it the right way. But now you've got now you can run that play legitimately because you now have a offensive lineman who is more than capable of sealing that. You just don't ask 240 to hit 340 in that tight space. It just doesn't work.
It didn't work.
Yeah, it did not work. It was a dreadful play, dreadful sequence of events for Iowa. So
yeah, it was.
But no. What? Let me ask you this, Chad. What do you think of the offensive line play, and what do you think their trajectory is?
Well, obviously, you can't argue with the rush game stats. I feel like the pass protection actually has been pretty good. I know people. Sometimes coaches scoff at PFF or whatever, but Mason Richmond's pass block grade this year has been tremendous. So I think that's a testament to his health. And then here's one other little pearl of wisdom that one of our YouTube watchers on Saturday night offered, and I looked it up again today or Wednesday. And this is crazy stat, Scott. Iowa scored 36 third quarter points last year. They have 50 already this year.
Man, that's amazing.
And the reason I say that now, as it ties to the offensive line, is Tim Lester was talking the other day about how, first of all, he works his play calls in the first half so they can figure out what to do, okay, how they're playing them, and here's what we're going to do. And he said the offensive line, those guys are older, they figure that stuff out mid-game. Like they're figuring that stuff out on the fly. They're fixing it. That's why you're seeing more. All those things are why you're seeing more second half production, especially from the running game. And I give credit to the offensive line for that, just because of what Lester said. He said the pass game, we're not there yet. We're not able to adjust in game as quickly yet. So I think this is a huge testament to the O-line. And it'll be a fun little storyline this week, I feel like, Scott. Connor Colby, you remember the Ohio State game 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a rough day for him.
No.
And I believe that ended the tackle experiment, if I recall correctly. He gets
Yeah.
to go back here now as a much more mature senior offensive lineman. So it just is kind of indicative, I guess, of the growth that we're seeing. And I'm pretty impressed with what they're doing this year.
Yeah, in fact, they didn't even make it off the bus from that flight before Kirk told George Barnett to move him to guard. I mean, that's the truth,
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't even make it to,
Who
back to
played
Iowa
tackle
State.
that day? Was it Plum?
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and watch. I don't know if I want to watch it, but
Yeah, you don't want to watch that game. I don't think anybody, it doesn't serve any purpose on that. But what does serve a purpose though, Chad, is all of your listeners, all of our listeners that like 38 Special, like I do, and you've got your chance to win some tickets here at the Hoyt Sherman Place in Des Moines. And that is 38 Special is coming to Des Moines, November 24th. And yes, Chad Leistikow and Scott Dochterman of Legends and Leaders, that's us, have tickets to give away to 38 Special's concert. There's only 50 tickets left, so your best bet to get it is to actually register for this contest. Go to iowaeverywhere.com, and you can either purchase your tickets through there or enter to win your chance. All winners will be selected on the October 3rd edition of Legends and Listeners. And so when you are rocking into the night, and you're holding on loosely, thank Chad for your tickets.
Well done, Scott. Yeah, it sounds like they're pretty much out, right? Almost out of tickets. So
yeah,
the only place to get them here, Iowa Everywhere. We can hook you up. October 3rd, right? That's when we're giving them away. All right.
October 3rd is when we're giving them away for November 24th.
All right, man. Before we clear out of the offense conversation, I know it was a long one, but it was such a rich conversation, I thought, Scott. Let's talk a little bit about the red zone. Like, what's next there? It's interesting. You see Bowie and Howard in the red zone package this week. That was an interesting little wrinkle. I loved the wrinkle of moving Gill in motion, having him loop around Sullivan and Johnson on that very first touchdown. And he attracted Gill, I noticed, attracted two sets of eyes, and one guy went with Sullivan on the handoff because they're accounting for the running quarterback now.
Yeah.
And that's the numbers advantage you need then. It's 8-on-8 plus Caleb Johnson. So I like those odds from 1 yard out.
Exactly. I mean, if you're Cade McNamara, it's 10-on-11. It just is. And then the running back doesn't have much leverage either. So it's really 11-on-9, So in this situation, you are playing with somebody who can do something with the ball in their hands. And yes, they got to account for him. I'm sure that they went back and watched Northwestern tape, and they know that he's coming in on some of these situations. And I think that's really a good thing. I like the way they loop with Jacob Gill, as you said. I'm a little unsure yet on the receiver, the other receivers in the red zone, just because I've seen some inexperienced ones drop passes in the end zone, and you just don't want that to happen. But they haven't done it yet. But I've also, I don't know, maybe I saw Adrian Falconer do that 2-point conversion too many times back in 16. But most of all, I just want Luke Lachey to get more involved in the offense. I really think, and I can't quite tell if it's just, I think they're trying, and it's just not, everybody kind of knows that he's that good. But I think he does. If nothing else, maybe he gets a touchdown at Ohio State, and that would really cement some things, for him. But still, it's, that's the one that I want to see, just selfishly, because I like Luke. I think he and Megan Gustafson to me are the nicest athletes of the last 10 years that
It's a great comp. Yeah, he's under 100 yards so far receiving this year, and Lester was asked about him as well. Last question, I believe, and he basically said, he's blocking so well right now that's going to open up opportunities for him in the pass game. And obviously that's the part that's behind right now. The run game's ahead, the pass game's behind. Ohio State's it's going to be a tough challenge, but Scott, as we'll get to in the Big Ten conversation a little later, opportunities there for Iowa to win a lot of games after next Saturday. So the key is improvement, especially on offense. Like you said, feel good about the defense. Speaking of the defense, Scott, Phil Parker spoke on Tuesday as well. Throw it to you. What stood out? What was the most interesting thing to you that he discussed in his 17, 18 minutes?
I would say that my takeaway primarily from him wasn't maybe necessarily anything he said. It was the way he said it. it was almost like the Aaron Rodgers RELAX, when he was with the Packers, and just relax everybody. He started kind of going through some statistics. He mentioned the run figures, how much better they were from the last year to this year at this point in the season. The points per game, that's down from what it was. He was really just trying to almost let everybody know, yeah, we got this. All right. Just relax a little bit. And that was my main takeaway from him. It was just, guys, we got it. Don't worry about it. And because every bit of fandom is the same way. It doesn't matter if it's Iowa or it's Nebraska or whatever, that they freak out over the smallest details. And I think, this defense isn't nearly as good as what it once was. Well, okay, they gave up a couple of touchdown drives, but still only 14 points. I mean, come on. It's a little bit above their average. It's 13.8. And then, they've given up before that, 5 touchdowns, and 4 of them were on explosive plays. 1 on special teams, 3 explosive defensive plays, and 1 legit drive to Iowa State. That's not bad. I mean, if they even give up 3 touchdowns to Ohio State, you got to feel pretty good. So that was my main takeaway. Chad, what did you think?
I love that observation by you, Scott. I think you're exactly right. I didn't totally pick up on that in the moment, I guess, but he did come in prepared with some numbers, didn't he?
Yeah.
Good numbers.
Yeah.
Because sometimes he'll kind of gripe about stuff they're giving up, but not this time. You're right. That was pretty good. I ended up writing live about Cohen Entringer and Xavier Wampa. It's just a fascinating storyline to me. I mean, you've got the 5-star safety who's playing less snaps, at least he did against Minnesota, than Cohen Entringer, who tore his ACL in the Citrus Bowl. So it's interesting. I was curious where they're going with this. I guess I think he got asked twice about it, including once by me. And I think where they're going with this is Cohen's too good to keep off the field. They love him. He would have been starting this year if Quinn Schulte had gone pro or gone on to whatever he was going to do, with Wampa back there. And so getting Entringer as much experience as possible is going to benefit the team this year. It's going to benefit the team next year. If Castro goes down at cash, Scott, Entringer's the cash. If Schulte goes down, Scott, Wampa to free, Cohen Entringer to strong. So there's basically 3 ways Cohen can get on the field. Plus, he's their nickel guy now, it looks like. So, Fisher comes in for Jackson and Cohen comes in for Xavier. So he's getting on the field a lot. Xavier's still starting the games. I'd like to see more production from both of them. They both have exactly 6 tackles and no other stats through 4 games. So would like to see more production out of that position. And maybe that's what they're searching for, Scott.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And, at risk, I don't want to sound like I'm down on Xavier. I think, that one big play he allowed, and, it was most of it was on him. It wasn't exclusively on him. I mean, you got to reroute your slot receiver if you're a linebacker. You got to make sure that he doesn't have a clean release and can streak past any safety on the field, whether it's Cohen Entringer or take your pick at the NFL level. It's hard to make that play. So, Xavier you're kind of wanting him to take that step forward. I think he's prepared to do it. He just hasn't done it yet. And Entringer is a good player. And if nothing else, he doesn't like to talk about it anymore, but the play in the Big Ten championship game tells you all you need to know about Cohen Entringer, which is, to miss that tackle at the 8-yard line and then to get up and run and knock the guy, down inside the 5, the Michigan punt returner on the opposite side. I told him, I said, how many coaches have reached out to you around the country? And he's like, I've had a lot, or they called my high school coach and stuff like that, because that's such an inspirational play. That's something that, they always say, effort is, you can't coach it. You just know it. And if you're a high school football coach, everybody in America can point to that and said, he didn't give up on this play. This is why you don't give up. And it's such a teachable moment, kind of like Don Beebe back in the Super Bowl when we were in college, knocking the ball out of Leon Lett's hands at the goal line. And effort plays matter. And I think him showing that effort and having the skill set to do it. And to me, he's just a fascinating story. His parents work for the University of Michigan. He's from Ypsilanti, they came in late with an offer. I know Wisconsin was heavy after him. Notre Dame was heavy after him. And he comes to Iowa, and he's really performed. And you don't want to keep that guy off the field if he's that good. So, and as he's pointed out, and he's rightly so, injuries happen sometimes. And so something may happen. It may be just for a play. It may be for a game. It may be worse, but if you can have him there, that's really helpful. And I think right now the good thing that has happened with the secondary is that they've been able to build some depth.
Yeah. Yeah. Cornerback. I'm interested. I don't think that's settled yet. I know we talked a little bit about that earlier, but I thought Deshaun did a good job, especially tackling. I thought he was really effective there, but they're definitely going at that second corner, whoever it is, every week. So whoever's in there has got to be prepared, and the next guy probably has to be prepared too in case Phil gets a little trigger happy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when they start blitzing, then they have to start covering in different areas, and a lot of times that's man coverage or one-on-one coverage if it's not exclusively man. So you're just gonna have to realize it happens, and I think they're talented. And I think John Nestor is too. He hasn't really gotten an opportunity there, but I think it's interesting to me though, because John Nestor seemed like he was going to be the guy, but the other two performed better. So I'm glad to see that, that sometimes it feels like somebody gets anointed and then they're like, we used to, call them union card guys and, guys that just got to stay in there. And that wasn't the case in this situation.
Yeah, I do like that on both sides of the ball now. Both coordinators they're searching for answers in season. It's not, you're just not sticking with whatever was the rigid plan coming into the season. You're evolving. On offense, you're going with the new red zone package. On defense, hey, let's try this safety. Let's try these corners. Let's give Deshaun Lee a chance. He started pretty admirably last year with Jamari out and Cooper DeJean out. And so, I just like the flexibility, I guess, overall. Good football, Scott. It's always great to watch good football with a nice drink. So it's always it's always a good time to pour a glass of Steeple Ridge bourbon, a sensational farm to bottle smooth drinking experience with Steeple Ridge bourbon. One glass of Steeple Ridge rewards you with high quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled by Lonely Oak Distillery here in the great state of Iowa. Special teams wise with LeVar Woods, Scott, I guess coming out of the Minnesota game, I feel much better about the punting game. And on Hawk Central last night, I said Drew Stevens might not ever miss again. And so I've already heard from people that it's my fault the next time he misses a kick. So go ahead. You can blame me because it'll be my fault. Yeah,
I agree. They should blame you for that. I mean, I saw one hellacious miss there in 2009, a 21-yard field goal, 22-yard field goal missed at the horseshoe, and they ended up losing in overtime. So that was a tough sequence because Trey Strauss drops a touchdown, and then right after that, then Daniel Murray misses a chip shot, and then they end up losing 27-24 in overtime.
15 years ago, I just realized that. That's exactly 15 years ago.
Yeah, man. Crazy. I was 36 years old. But overall, I mean, I think, Reese was, the game against Troy, LeVar was a little bit more, he knew which direction to go in a little bit, which he knew that he punted the wrong way. That's what caused the return. Kirk can kind of throw the unit under the bus, but it was really more the punter in that situation. And I thought he more than made up for it. I mean, he was National Punter of the Week. I know when I tweeted it out, I had like fans from like Minnesota or from Nebraska. They're like, where do you find these guys in Iowa? And I'm like, the crazy part is they actually had the number one ranked punter about an hour south of Iowa City who grew up an Iowa fan. And they actually chose to go halfway around the world to go get their next punter. And they let him go to Georgia. I mean, that's just nuts. But still, the way that when Australian punters, their style of punt, punt kick Australia, it's really working out. So I think both of those two guys are clear assets at this point. All right, Scott, anything else on Hawkeye football you want to discuss before we hit the Big Ten? One other thing, Chad, just a stat that I think that we should throw out there. They're only 73rd in total offense around the country. That's not great, except that it's 397.8 yards per game. And last year was 234.6, which was last in the country. And now they're averaging a full 2 yards per play more than what they did last year. I know that pace is going to drop a little bit. You're playing better competition, but still, I think that there needs to be some perspective on how quickly they have grown as an offense under Tim Lester.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk a lot about the Ohio State matchup next week, obviously. Notable Big Ten results last week. Scott, I think the two biggies were Illinois over Nebraska and Michigan over USC. Both were basically touchdown underdogs at one point, and they went out right. It was kind of some late game, improbable heroics, arguably against the better passing attack. I actually went to I had that 10K the next morning, as you know, and so I went to sleep before the end of the Illinois game happened, and I went to bed thinking Nebraska was going to pull away with that one. And boy, what another! How do they keep losing these one-score games? It's just an unbelievable. I mean, is it like a systemic program thing? Is it bad luck? Like, how does this keep happening to Nebraska?
I don't want to answer that, man.
I forgot. You
they don't like
enough Nebraska fans.
They hate me. No, this one may be a little different than the past. I mean, they all count the same, but I think that they're on the path upward. But I think sometimes you have to learn how to win. And you have to learn whether it's intestinal fortitude, just the grit, the toughness to pull it out, to really fight. And they have most of that. They still look like a good team to me. I'm not going to, not like last year or every other year, last 6-7 years where they've fallen apart. They look like to me that they just need to learn how to win. And Illinois, to their credit, great. They have some really good wide receivers. Pat Bryant is one of the best players in the Big Ten. And Zachary Franklin, he kind of has bounced around a little bit, but he's also an elite wide receiver. And Luke Altmaier has 10 touchdowns and no interceptions. That's pretty damn impressive. And Caden Fagan, he reminds me of Nick Bell. I mean, he's 6'2", 250, and he looks, just like. There's no fat on him or anything. I mean, just but I'll say this: their defense is probably what's helped them get to this point. I mean, they're the only team in the country that's beaten 2 ranked opponents so far this year. So that'll probably change this weekend, but with Alabama and Georgia. But and then they may be the third too, for that matter. I mean, they play a pretty good opponent this week at Penn State. So I was impressed watching Illinois, their toughness, what they were able to do and the way they came back and how they pulled out that game. And, and then ultimately, they're ranked now 19th. They're 4-0.
Yeah.
They've got a shot at a minimum of a bowl. And if they pull this one out, don't discount them going pretty far this year.
Yeah. And I'm pointing out the Nebraska history here, but I actually was really impressed with Dylan Raiola. The whole time I saw him, he looked good. Before I went to sleep, but it sounded like the overtime wasn't super pretty. But no, I think Nebraska still looks like a really good team to me. I think that'll be one of Iowa's tougher games, I think, down the stretch for sure. And then what do we got this week? It's kind of some interesting matchups, Scott. I mean, the one I think is for Iowa fans to tune into is actually on Peacock, 6:30 Saturday night, Ohio State, Michigan State. You get a look at the Buckeyes, and you get to look at your next road opponent in Michigan State, which you probably aren't super familiar with a brand new coach. And so it's a good chance to check in on those guys. We're in Big Ten play now, Scott. So there's a lot of great games. What jumps out to you?
All of them for different reasons. The first night is fascinating to me. Washington's got to go all the way across the country to Newark and then drive down to Piscataway to go to Rutgers. Rutgers is undefeated, and they're favored against the defending runners-up. I mean, they're 2.5-point favorite. And Rutgers is kind of like Iowa, passing game, running game, yeah. And then the defense is probably not as good as Iowa's, but it's still pretty good. I think that's a really interesting matchup. And of course, Washington comes to Iowa City the week after Ohio State. So I'm fascinated by that. But if there's a team that I'm really just eyeing and I'm wondering where they're going, that's Indiana. 4-0 under Kirk Cignetti. Really like Curtis Rourke as a quarterback. He's played really well. They've just crushed opponents, winning by 50 points per game. And they're playing Maryland this week. They're 6 and Indiana is a 6.5-point favorite. Then they go to Northwestern the following week. They could be 6-0 entering a bye, and before they play Nebraska at home. That's pretty impressive. And then I'm also intrigued for a lot of reasons on Wisconsin USC. I mean, what's Wisconsin going to be like? How does USC regroup? I mean, is this? I'm intrigued for a lot of, like I said, this is a crossroads game, I think, for both programs, but especially for Wisconsin based on what just happened against Alabama. Tyler Van Dyke losing for the season. Can they come back and play well, or is this going to be a really tough campaign?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of those types of games where we're used to seeing Wisconsin historically kind of show up and play well. So, but it's a different era, Luke Fickell era. We'll see. Man, talk about you're Mr. TV here, Scott. What a lineup this weekend, to have a bye week. I'm not saying there's amazing games across the board, but for us who are kind of Big Ten nerds, very compelling. So you got Washington Rutgers, like you said, 7:00 on Fox Friday. You get Minnesota, Michigan for the big noon. You get Wisconsin, USC for the 2:30 CBS game. And then you get a double dose at 6:30, Ohio State, Michigan State, Illinois, Penn State gets the NBC treatment. And then you're not done after that. You get Oregon, UCLA I'm reading this right? 10 o'clock Central?
Yes.
On Fox.
Yes.
I mean, talk about a lineup. Wow.
I know. And I've got TV duty again this weekend.
Okay.
So from 11 a.m. until the end of the Oregon UCLA game, I'm going to be glued to the TV. It's so much more exhausting and hard work than it is to go to a game, even a singular game. So it's a heck of a lineup. And then, you throw on the other games around the country too, like Alabama, Georgia that night, that's a pretty big game. So couch potatoes unite. I mean, this is the week for it. But Chad, what are we going to talk about on Sunday, Big Ten wise? Is there a storyline coming out of Saturday that you foresee that you're going, yeah, I think everybody's talking about that?
Like last week, Michigan was a surprise. I did not think they were going to beat USC. I'm interested in that Minnesota game. Could Michigan possibly be kind of like Iowa was last year in a way, except with Michigan players, somehow keep winning without a quarterback? I don't know. That's an interesting one. I'm not envisioning any big upsets here, but who knows? I think it's going to be interesting to see if Ohio State looks mortal at all going on the road here. East Lansing's not easy at night. We know that. They look kind of plucky. I just think and then of course, as we've mentioned, Oregon is the week at Oregon is after the Iowa game. So the Iowa game could be a total trap game here, potentially. So I don't know if you're an Iowa fan, if you want Ohio State to look great or if you want them to look beatable. I think you probably want beatable, right?
Yeah. They're Ohio State, and
they don't look beatable to me. But I'm interested to see. Their running game looks so good. Yeah. I'm just not that impressed with Will Howard. That's the thing that gives me a little hope for the Hawks.
You just don't know, is Will Howard as good as everybody? Is he better than everybody, or is he just merely, a little bit better Max Brosmer? We don't know, and we won't know until we see him compete against Iowa. I think there are, the one game that I think could have everybody talking is Illinois at Penn State. And that is, if Illinois wins, then they're the talk and the toast of the Big Ten. If Penn State wins decisively and they're 18-point favorites, at least that's the last I saw, then they are the talk of the Big Ten as they're the team that's got the chance to beat Ohio State. If Penn State wins by a field goal or a touchdown, I don't know that will be the talk about. Instead, it will be the Indiana Hoosiers, because they could be 5-0, and that says a lot to me. That they are, they've had a schedule that their toughest game has been UCLA, and they are UCLA, UCLA.
Exactly.
So, but they're still Indiana. Historically, they have more losses than any other team in Big Ten history, and they're coming off a 3-9 season or 2-10 season, and already have 4 wins and play the way they have. I think they could be the darlings of the country if they, because they could easily go 6-0, have a bye, and then host Nebraska and turn that into a rush the field moment over in Bloomington.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've impressed me so far. Indiana has. All right, busy week next week, Scott. Big Ten Media Days, right? In basketball. So that'll give you a chance to dig into the Iowa women, which on Wednesday announced another sellout for the entire season at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Honestly, that doesn't surprise me. But I think a lot of people around the country are probably, oh, wow. So it's not just Caitlin Clark.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was trying to tell people about that with Kate Martin, how much people loved her and Gabby Marshall last year. And then Kate Martin goes to the WNBA, and then she's, got a fan group called the Martinis, and, so they're giving her Hello Kitty backpacks and everything, and which has been great. But truly, as we know, Iowa women's fans, even before this phenomenon, are, to me, probably the best of fans, because they really embraced every part of every aspect of the program. They weren't really demanding. They were just fans. And I think that they've been introduced now to so many other people who really enjoy watching them and genuinely like the people, Chad, that are a part of it, that they want to support them. Even if they know that what happened with Caitlin Clark was lightning in a bottle, it'll never happen again. They'll probably never go to the final, who knows? Maybe they'll go to a Final Four someday again, but just not the same type of phenomenon. Yet they want to be a part of it, and they want to support it, and they love it. And, just look at all the people getting WNBA apps, and they still want to feel the same way. So I'm not surprised either, but I think, people should be proud of this, because it never happened before last year. And now it's happened twice, only at Iowa.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, ask around the country. A lot of people probably wouldn't know who's still on the Hawkeye team, but Iowa women's fans know. I mean, they're, our metrics tell us people care about Iowa women's basketball. That's absolute truth. And so I'm excited. You'll be there for the Athletic. We'll have Tyler Tashman and Dargan Southern both there for the Des Moines Register. I won't be there, but I'll be getting ready to head to the Death Star, Scott.
Yeah.
Next Friday, baby. That's going to be that's I don't know. That stadium is just something else.
It is. It's
I don't know what to expect in that game, honestly. I'm going to have to break that. I need to see Ohio State play before I make a decision on how this is going to go, but we'll see.
Well, one of the things I always liked about it, we're going way back to 2009, 15 years ago, as you said. When
it is.
that game was the last winner-take-all Big Ten championship game on campus. And that because the winner clinched. And even though that they had to play Michigan the next week, it didn't matter. And Iowa played Minnesota. When they came off the bus, they were all Ohio State. They were all dressed in 3-piece suits. They each walked down the sidelines, and then they were playing the theme song to The Sopranos. And I just thought, that is awesome. That's just badass. That's like, we're Ohio State and you're not. And I, it didn't intimidate Iowa or anything, but it was just like, we are, Ohio State and you're not. And I thought that was just awesome.
Oh, so many storylines for that one. I wonder what Kirk Ferentz is. I mean, I know he's like the same every week or whatever, but I just wonder if he even thinks about how many more times is this my last time going to Ohio Stadium? Is this my last chance to win over there? He hasn't won there.
He hasn't won there.
So So many interesting stories. He could get 200, Scott. He
Yes.
could get to 200. You know, in the home of Woody Hayes.
Yeah.
The one guy he's still got to track down now. He's at 199. So
Yeah.
man,
He's tied with
So-
Amos Alonzo Stagg.
and then you think about Caleb Johnson's from Ohio, Luke Lachey's from Ohio, Cade McNamara beat Ohio State
Yeah.
in
Exactly.
2021. I mean, so many interesting little storylines for us to dig into, write about. It's
Yeah.
going to be a fascinating, fun week, Scott, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why you embrace it. You have to love it because it doesn't have, I mean, we're almost at the end of September, Chad,
Mhm.
and then it's October, and then it's November, then it's Christmas, and then it's like, what happened? And it happens, it just flies by. So soak it up. We're a third of the season's already over with. So, 8 more games to go in the regular season.
All right, great show, Scott. For
Yeah.
Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow, Legends and Listeners, with you every Thursday morning during football season here from the Channel Seed Studios, only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.